Hi, my name is Karina Akidal. I'm the managing editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. I'm here with Chris Nadolny from Pitcher and Doyle. I understand, Chris, that actually the company released a notice to dealerships because there was an increase in fraud activity. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about what this is exactly, what type of fraud, how it impacts dealerships, and what they should know.
Thank you. As you said, we did release a bulletin to dealers, and it was as a result of an increase in fraud, and we're seeing it actually right across the country, from Vancouver to Halifax. And what it is social engineering. So the fraudster is creating a false identity or using parts of a stolen identity in order to be pre-qualified or conditionally qualified to finance a vehicle. And then what's happening is the dealer is getting conditional approval, releasing the vehicle, and finding out several days later that the individual didn't actually exist, and the bank or the financing institution is denying the funding.
Now, I understand also that Pitcher and Doyle does have some advice to offer to dealers on how they could manage this situation, how they can decrease the chance of this type of fraud. Maybe you can tell us or offer some of the examples of just how they can do that.
Yes, we did put together a quick checklist of things that dealers can do as a preventative measures, or even just to slow down the deal as it's progressing, to take a look at specific items. The number one thing that we always tell dealers, and it's tough because dealers are dealers and they want a deal, but if it's too good to be true, chances are it is. So if you've got somebody coming in late on a Saturday evening of a holiday weekend and everything looks good on paper, perhaps slow the deal down and say, well, come on back Tuesday morning and we'll have that car ready for you. That sort of thing. So we are doing a lot of, at this point, Zoom, because we're not in meetings in dealerships, but fraud prevention sort of meetings with sales teams, because it starts at the top, but it has to be communicated all the way down. So our number one thing is, A, is it too good to be true? And B, if something doesn't look right in a deal, get more involved. Have a manager, have two managers look at the deal before the car rolls over the curb.
Now, are there any other types of frauds that fraud situations, sorry, that dealers should be aware of as well, not just the one you had mentioned in the notice?
Of course, there are cyber thefts are on the rise, and phishing schemes and that sort of thing. And we are seeing an increase in that also. And perhaps because of COVID, dealerships are doing more online sales and more susceptible to these type of frauds. But I think the number one thing, and I already said, if a deal's too good to be true, chances are it is. So we have to slow down, and I know it's contrary to business acumen, but we have to slow down the deal and look at every piece of identification. How did the individual arrive at the dealership? What is the urgency to get this vehicle out? There's usually a false sense of urgency to get the deal done. So those are the sort of things that we're recommending when we're speaking with sales teams.
So I understand also the notice sort of mentioned the idea of keeping an eye on IDs also, and there was something about cameras that dealers had to sort of pay more attention to. Maybe you can go in depth about that and explain exactly what that was about.
Sure. What we're suggesting is that dealers not require only one piece of identification, but actually ask for two or three pieces of identification. Copy these pieces of identification and check these pieces of identification very closely for discrepancies. If they are fake or doctored in any way, often it's easier to tell when you have two or three pieces as opposed to a single really well done fraudulent piece. And with respect to camera systems, most dealers do have camera systems of some sort. And what we're recommending is that at some point you make it not so obvious as to offend a real customer, but obvious enough that it would scare off a would-be fraudster to patrol and actually tour the individual by the camera system. So they actually see that they're being captured on film. We found that's very effective in deterring, fraud of any type actually at dealerships.
Now, Chris, I wonder if that will make customers feel a little uncomfortable, especially with the social distancing measures that are still in place. Is there anything they can do that would be that dealers can do that would be more subtle?
Sure, sure. I mean, the number one thing that we recommend to dealers when they're installing a camera system is sort of cover all points of entry to the building. So in theory, if you've got a well-designed camera system, you've already captured the individual entering the building. So, I mean, to that end, chances are we've already got it captured.
Perfect. And Chris, do you have any additional advice that you'd like to offer dealers on this point, just in terms of security, fraud, or anything else?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier, but again, it starts at the top, and it's got to be pushed down, and it's got to be communicated regularly, because at the end of the day, we are all in business to make the deal, but we have to keep this at the front of our minds. It should be something that's discussed even briefly at your weekly sales meetings. And as I said, start at the top and push it down. And as an insurer partner, we are available, and we're on these calls often promoting these types of awareness.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview, Chris. And I wish you and your family good health and safety during this difficult period.